Well, hello everybody, this is DearMamaSal again, and on the second part of my journey, and the second part of this discussion. So the question that I really want to pose to you is, if you are having reactions to things in a childish way, then the chances are that you have at some level been traumatized and never really developed into what I call adult ways. And there are lots of subtleties around this one. But the thing is, are the majority of your reactions ones of a child or ones of an adult? Now that doesn't mean you have to be stiff and boring and not, all those sort of things, but it's about, hello, how do you do on the adult scale? Are you accountable for your own actions? Do you think you're entitled to things that you're not that quite honestly you're not? Do you think that you can spend money and somehow it will magically appear? Do you constantly wait for somebody to bail you out of trouble? Do you blame others for your life? Because I've got news for you. The person I was talking to yesterday could blame a lot of people for what they did to her medically. And she doesn't. She forgave them a long time ago and got on with her life. You can blame your parents for whatever it is that they did to you. Or you can forgive them and understand they didn't know any better and that's all there was to it. But they didn't do this to you intentionally. They just didn't know any better. They didn't have the skills. They didn't have the knowledge. And move on with your life. Get the therapy you need. Do the reading you need to do whatever needs to be done to get through this and move on. Get on with your life. But a lot of people stay stuck, and they stay stuck forever. Why? Because the reality of what being an adult is too frightening for them. It is too frightening. They don't want to learn, they don't want to face the facts, they do not want to deal with reality. And so, this is the story of the brother at this moment. Why would he deal with reality when he can live in this fantasy? And who creates the fantasy? The family. They perpetuate the fantasy. And what I was saying to this viewer was, hey, I'd be having a little bit of discussion with your brother and saying, hey, bud, I understand that you don't want to pay us rent for your room and board, but we need it. So if you don't want to pay it, we may need you to move out so we can get somebody in that can. Because all our budgets are based on the fact that we will get X% from the room. The other thing I believe, and I believe wholeheartedly, if you are in a relationship of any sort, whether that's male, female, wife, husband, family member, whatever, you are entitled to basic respect. And basic respect has nothing to do with a mental condition. It has to do with basic respect. So I will respect the fact that you are not a tiny person, as long as you will respect the fact that when you are in public rooms in this house, you will act accordingly. In other words, if you're going to leave all the doors open, if you are going to constantly just make a mess and not clean it up, your rights to use the kitchen will be removed. The rights to use the kitchen is a privilege. And if you own the kitchen, quite honestly, if you own the kitchen, you could basically leave it any way you like. It's your kitchen. You paid for it. But if you have other people living with you, you may want to respect the fact that keep the common areas tidy out of respect for people around you. So I think that a lot of this stuff, a lot of this inner child stuff, continues because we allow it to continue. That is my belief. In other words, we enable the problem. Instead of making sure that people become accountable, we enable the problem. We actually support it, if you like. It's really what it is. And for any of you who have been in an alcoholic relationship or a wife-beating relationship or any of those things, you will know that your fear keeps you from doing anything to correct the problem. Your fear of being hit, your fear of another drunken rampage, your fear of whatever, stops you from actually doing anything to correct the situation. And so it is really important for you to search out groups that can help you. I'm not sure what is available in your area, but as the majority of my viewers are either in Canada or the States, what I'm about to say should be true for most of you. In almost every community, there are groups like Alcoholics Anonymous or Codependents Anonymous or it's not called Drugs Anonymous. What's it called? Something like that anyway. And if you don't know, speak to your local church because they'll know. Or speak to your doctor because he or she will know. And get some help. And the nice thing about the step type programs is that they're free. You actually do not need to pay anything. I think they normally suggest you chip in for your tea or coffee, whatever you have. But it is a great place if you don't have the money to go to therapy, or if you don't have the ability to go to therapy, at least go and work on a 12-step program and do it regularly. And it's not about being just the alcoholic, it's those of you who have lived with that situation. And that's why they have sub-programs. For example, with Alcoholics Anonymous, they actually have a program called Al-Anon, which is for the families of people who are alcoholic, where it actually teaches you about how not to be codependent to these problems. Because if you're codependent to the one problem, you're likely to be codependent to a lot of them. And at least that's a safe environment where you can go and talk about the issues that you're having. And you'll be surprised to hear you're not the only one. You're not alone in these issues. These issues happen for anybody who's suffering in the way that you have. I've often said that the most magical thing about this day and age is you can Google everything. But what I like about doing something like an Alcoholics Anonymous program or Al-Anon program, what I like about those programs is you really do get to talk about it, and you get to hear other people's versions of it, which sometimes makes it a lot easier to understand. You might not understand what you did, but boy, you can listen to somebody else and go, what? Are you insane? You're allowed that to happen? And then it makes you look at your own stuff and go, wow, so did I. In my own version of this, so did I. And so that's why it's really important to do. So I encourage you all to really study this whole issue. The whole issue of emotional intelligence. I know some of you will be Googling that up and having a look at it. There is a whole lot of difference between natural IQ intelligence and emotional intelligence. I've met some pretty smart people in my time. But I've also met some incredibly immature people in my time. And really, that's what emotional intelligence is about. How mature are you in your thinking? And this is not about how sick are you. This is about, with whatever that's going on in your life, how mature are you? Are you using whatever your situation is as an excuse for not doing anything? Because it sure beats the alternative of having to be responsible and accountable and work for a living and do whatever. You know, all these things you do. And a lot of you will know what I'm talking about here, because you've been there. And maybe if you're really lucky, you fought your way out and had a life again. And that's really what I would want for people, is have a life. So this incredible lady I spoke to last night, whose mother, bless her heart, decided to actually listen in and eventually participated with it. I give them 10 out of 10 because they've reached to the point where they need to do something and they know it. The question is, will they? It's their life. They get to choose. But what I said, to this mother and adult daughter was, you may want to go back and start studying how you deal with a teenage son. Because really that's what the behavior is. It's not of an adult. It's the behavior of a teenage son. And you know, if your teenage son wants to live like a slob, that's great. Why don't you move out and live like that? Because as long as you live in this house, you don't get to live like that. How many of you had those rules for your children? Most mothers did. And whether it was, listen, if you want to live with a mess in your room, that's your business. But you will get it cleaned up once a month, or whatever your rule was. But most mothers had one. If you want to take all the plates out of the kitchen and use them and not return them to the kitchen, then your privilege of using our plates has gone. You will now have paper plates, and you may only use those if you're going to the bedroom. And if you abuse that and still take the good ones, then plates are no longer an issue. Yeah, you've got to get tough on these things. But oh gosh, what if I upset him and he starts to react badly? Well, of course he's going to be upset and react badly. You're about to become a parent. You are about to become an adult. And he's not used to that. You bet he's going to fight and scream and perform. And the trick is to expect that. And go, I know you're upset. And I really want to apologize for the fact we didn't actually teach you how to be an adult a long time ago. But starting today, we're going to do that. Because somewhere along the line, you've got to learn to survive on your own. And at the moment, you have no coping skills for surviving on your own. You know nothing about being responsible for paying your part of the contribution to this household. You do not understand about respect of other people's property. You do not understand this, that, and the other. And that is our fault because we have not supported that. But we just want to give you fair warning. We're going to teach it to you now because that is the only way that you are going to grow up. Because at the moment your behaviors are that of a 12-year-old, not one of a 22-year-old or a 32-year-old in some cases. So to go back on this whole thing about those of us who have lived with some sort of level of abuse. And I count myself in on this. Plus, I also have some level of PTSD. Luckily, fairly minor, but I do have the symptoms. So, let's go back over it again. If your reaction to certain things is inclined to be childish rather than adult, and how do you know if it's childish? Well, you're saying things like, it's not fair, nobody loves me, or I hate that person because I can't get my own way, or why doesn't somebody make this better? Or if I ignore it, maybe it'll go away. These are childish reactions, not adult reactions. You know, adults, when they hit a problem, go, this sucks, now let me work out what I need to do about it. They are proactive. They don't wait for the brown sticky stuff to hit the fan. They do something before it does. And if by any chance, you know, they couldn't avoid that happening, they don't blame the world. They blame themselves, but then they don't sit and beat up on themselves for the rest of their life. They do something to start again. That's adult behavior. So, I'm not being tough on people who've had a bad time. Don't get me wrong on this. I just know that I had all the excuses I needed. And I've been broke in my time. But I also know people who are in far worse situations and who are still happy. They actually still make a life for themselves, even with all those troubles going on. So, if you find yourself going into sort of numbness when bad things start to happen, where your brain starts to shut off and you can't cope anymore, then you've got an issue. One that you should be discussing with a doctor. If you do just fine until things start to go wrong and then you're totally overwhelmed, quite honestly, one part of me goes, that's perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal to overwhelm, but it's how long do you overwhelm for? Does it paralyze you completely? And if it does, you need to get some help. If you have somebody who is busy manipulating you with their illness, then you need some help. One of the most difficult things in the world to be is a caregiver of somebody who's sick or in some way incapacitated, because you've got double the stress. You've got your own stress and then somebody else's as well. And that's why they always say that the caregiver, quite often can have more problems than the person who is sick. The sick person is likely to outlive the caregiver in a lot of cases. So please, if you are having inner child issues, if you are reacting inappropriately, then go get help. Either free through some sort of program like AA, or else if you can have it within your system, get some professional help. This stuff does not go away just because you wanted to. Read a lot about it. Do things. I've always said you do not think your way out of depression. You do your way out of depression. You've got to get up in the morning and function. Oh, well, I can't, I'm too this and I'm too that. Well, hello, get out of bed and try. And do something. Give yourself a brownie point for getting dressed. Yes, it's a lot easier to lie in bed, I quite agree. But you know what you're doing to your body? So, for those of us who went out of normal emotional development into survivor because of some sort of childhood trauma, the journey from survivor back into human normal interaction is difficult. It requires a great deal of work. And some people will want to do it and some people won't. Some people will just keep repeating the same problems. I hope you're not one of them. I hope that if you've had this in your past, that you are doing something about it. And I hope that some of you can see that also, surprisingly enough, there are a lot of gifts in all of this as well. Gifts. And if you bother to sort of re-look at your life and go, I'm going to survive anyway. I intend to survive. I'm going to not use this as my crutch. I'm going to use this as my cane. And I'm going to use it as my strength rather than my weakness. Then you'll be amazed what you can do with your life, as many very famous people have. We choose every day whether to be a victim or not. I wonder what choices you've made. This is a huge, huge subject, one that we will have to spend many, many times chatting about, and I try not to do them all the time because that gets a little bit serious. And I know you'd much rather listen to the doofus reports. And I'm sure there'll be plenty more coming this weekend. So, big hug to all of you. Thank you for your patience on this one. Thank you, Roseanne, for suggesting I just do 2 sets on it. I hope it's brought a little bit of light to a couple of you. And if that has, then it was well worth the journey. This is Dear Mama Sal saying bye for now.